The first thing the station administrator said to me, after she'd checked my liaison credentials and before she'd offered me anything resembling a welcome, was that my dog was not permitted within 40 meters of the holding pen corridor. I told her I understood. She told me again. I said I'd heard her the first time and thank her for the clarity. She pulled up something on her terminal, turned it to face me, and let me read it myself. It was a list. 6 entries. Each one had a weight in kilograms, a threat classification code, and a photograph that I would charitably describe as unpleasant. The Vrethiki pack hunters that Way Station Ardok used for cargo security and crowd control, the Kethavar Compact's preferred tool for situations where a situation needed to stop being a situation, fast. The administrator's finger rested on the screen next to the first entry. 84 kilograms. 3 sets of articulated limbs, the back 2 functioning as legs and the front 4 as something between arms and reasons not to argue. Grey-plated hide. Eyes that sat too far apart and tracked independently, which I'd been told was a hunting adaptation. I told her my dog was 9 years old and had bad hips on cold mornings. The administrator did not appear to find this reassuring. Her name was Oveni, and she ran the commercial liaison desk at Way Station Ardok with the energy of someone who had personally prevented 3 interplanetary incidents this fiscal year and was not looking to add a 4th. The Way Station was a mid-tier hub in the Kethavar Compact's freight network, not glamorous, not a posting anyone had fought for, but busy in the particular way that storage depots and routing centers are busy, which is to say that nothing dramatic happened but everything had to happen correctly or something dramatic would happen later. I was there because a supply route dispute between 2 of Earth's agricultural export collectives and a Kethavar freight broker had produced a manifest error worth approximately 14,000 standard credits, and nobody on either side of the table could agree on whose column it sat in. Earth's export office had sent me because I had 30 years in agricultural logistics, a working knowledge of Kethavar freight taxonomy, and a flexible enough schedule that I could spend 2 weeks on a transit hub sorting through cargo documentation without anyone at home noticing I was gone. Cass had come because Cass always came. She'd been working dogs since before I retired. Border Collies don't really retire, they just renegotiate their scope of work, and at this point the idea of leaving her with my neighbour Brecht for 2 weeks was less appealing than the idea of explaining to a Galactic transit authority why I'd brought a dog. She was sitting beside my carry case in the liaison waiting area when Oveni finished her list. Black and white, 1 blue eye and 1 brown, the kind of stillness that looked like calm but was actually attention. Cass was always watching something, cataloguing it, running some internal calculation about where it was and where it was going to be. She had her chin on her front paws. She was watching the ventilation grill on the far wall with the focused patience of an animal who had decided the ventilation grill might, eventually, do something interesting, and she was prepared to wait. I told Oveni we'd stay clear of the holding pen corridor and signed the access form. The manifest dispute took the better part of 2 days to untangle, which was faster than I'd expected and slower than I'd hoped. Oveni had a deputy named Thresh, a young Kethavar male with the high-shouldered posture of someone permanently on the verge of a concerned question, who walked me through the freight records on the first afternoon with the kind of diligent thoroughness that is very helpful and also takes 4 hours. By the end of day 1, I'd found the origin of the error, which was a unit conversion mistake so simple it was almost insulting, and by noon on day 2 I'd drafted the corrected filing and sent it to both parties. What I had not done by noon on day 2 was make it to sub-level 3 to collect the physical cargo logs that Thresh kept telling me I needed the physical cargo logs, that the digital records were complete but the compact's order procedure required a physical log signature, and that the physical logs were kept at the routing supervisor station on sub-level 3, which was, he paused here, and I watched him decide how to say it, adjacent to the holding pen corridor. He walked me down himself, which I appreciated, and said nothing about Cass, which I also appreciated, though I noticed he kept slightly more distance from her than the corridor width required. Sub-level 3 smelled like hydraulic sealant and something organic I couldn't name. The lighting was utilitarian, broad-spectrum flat panels that made everything look like it was being documented. The routing supervisor station was a glass-fronted office off the main corridor, and I could see the physical log racks through the window, which meant I could also see that the routing supervisor was currently not at the routing supervisor station. Thresh checked his communicator and said she was held up at the cargo lift and would be back in approximately 12 minutes. We waited in the corridor. I had Cass on a 2-meter lead. She was walking a slow figure 8 around my legs, which is what she did when she was moderately interested in something, as opposed to the tight circle she walked when she was very interested, or the complete stillness she held when she had made a decision. I wasn't watching her closely. I was looking at my tablet, reviewing the corrected filing one more time, because I had learned over 30 years that the moment you stopped checking a corrected filing was the moment it turned out to still be wrong. The sound from behind the holding pen gate was not loud. It was a low, frequency-heavy exhale, the kind of sound that doesn't exactly reach your ears so much as arrive somewhere in your sternum, and Thresh went rigid beside me, which was the first indication that something in the room had changed. I looked up. There were 4 gates along the corridor wall, heavy gauge and sealed with redundant latches. The Vrethiki were behind them, 1 or 2 per enclosure, and they had been behind them when we'd walked in. I'd registered them peripherally, the way you register machinery, large things operating within their expected parameters. But in the 12 seconds since I'd last looked at the corridor, all 6 had come to the front of their enclosures. They were looking at Cass. Not the way animals look at something they want to eat, or the way animals look at something they want to remove from their territory. I've worked with animals my entire adult life and I know what those looks are. This was something else. The closest I can describe it, the way a very experienced sheepdog looks at another very experienced sheepdog that has just walked into the same field. Not aggression. Assessment. Cass had stopped walking her figure 8. She was standing still, lead slack, and she was looking at them. Not at any one of them specifically. She was doing what she did with a field of sheep, which was take in the whole and understand it as a single system. The brown eye and the blue eye, perfectly level, perfectly unhurried. The largest Vrethiki, enclosure 3, the 84-kilogram entry at the top of Ovany's list, made a sound. Not the chest-low exhale from before. This one was quieter. Almost a question. Cass looked at it directly for a count of about 2 seconds. Then she looked at the far wall. The large Vrethiki sat down. Not backward, not retreating, just Saturday. The way a very large thing sits when it has reached a conclusion. A moment later the one in enclosure 2 sat down also. Then the one in enclosure 4. The pair in enclosure 1 sat down together, synchronized, which I'd never seen a pair of anything do simultaneously without a signal I could identify. The 6th, smallest, held out for another 3 or 4 seconds, and then it put its front limbs down first and lowered itself the same way. They were all looking at Cass. Cass was looking at the wall. Thresh had not moved. His communicator was in his hand and I don't think he'd noticed. I looked at Cass. She looked back at me. Then she turned in a slow circle, lay down with her chin on her paws, and went back to watching the ventilation grill. The routing supervisor returned 5 minutes after that, found me in the corridor, apologized for making me wait, and handed me the physical log without apparently noticing that her 6 certified crowd control pack hunters were all sitting at the front of their enclosures in the specific posture that Thresh would later describe, in his incident report, as one he had never witnessed the Vrethiki adopt voluntarily, in 4 years of working with them, for any reason whatsoever. I signed the log and thanked her. On the way back up to the liaison level, Thresh walked a full meter to my left and did not speak until we reached the lift. Then he said, very carefully, that what had happened in the corridor was unusual. I said Cass was a herding dog. He said he understood that, but that the Vrethiki were certified Kethavar Class 7 territorial hunters, with active threat response conditioning, and that they had no documented history of adopting a passive deferral posture in response to. He paused. I waited. He said, in response to a pastoral subspecies of that size. I said she was 9 years old and came from a line of working dogs that had been moving animals across hill terrain for about 3,000 years, give or take, and that the animals they'd been moving were generally not interested in being moved. Thresh looked at Cass. Cass was looking at the lift panel. He filed the incident report that evening. It ran 17 pages, which I know because a copy was CC'd to Earth's liaison office, and my contact there forwarded it to me with a note that just said *, did you see this? *. The report covered the duration of the encounter, the observable behaviors of each individual Vrethiki, the ambient sensor readings from the corridor, nothing unusual, temperature stable, air composition normal, no chemical signaling compounds detected in concentrations above baseline, the behavioral history of the pack, hunters for the preceding 96 hours, and a concluding section titled Causative Hypothesis, which ran 6 pages and ended with the admission that no mechanism for the observed response had been identified, and that further observation was recommended. I finished my tea, filed my corrected manifest, and took the next outbound transit home. 3 months later, on a Tuesday, I was at the kitchen table reviewing some seed stock pricing when my tablet showed a notification from Earth's Interstellar Liaison Registry, routine bulletin, the kind of thing that arrives every few weeks and mostly concerns updated freight classifications and amended customs codes. I nearly swiped past it. The relevant section was subsection 7, Behavioral Standards, Compact Addendum 4.7.2. It was 2 paragraphs, dry as chalk, the administrative style that takes effort to write and more effort to read. I read it twice to make sure I was understanding it correctly. The Kethavar Compact's Behavioral Standards Office, acting on the documented findings of Incident Report ARD 2291 and 3 subsequent observational submissions from Compact-affiliated handler units, had formally entered into interstellar crowd control doctrine a recognized behavioral phenomenon designated * the sorting posture, canid, subclass, pastoral, **. The definition ran 4 sentences. It described an unsolicited dominant-neutral stance adopted spontaneously by a Terran pastoral herding subspecies when introduced to a multi-unit Vrethiki containment environment, resulting in universal passive deferral behavior across all present units regardless of individual threat classification level, without vocalization, without physical contact, and without any registered chemical or electromagnetic signal. The Compact's Handler Training Division was directed to review the phenomenon for potential application in multi-species containment protocol. The notation at the bottom of the entry read, * first documented instance, Waystation RDoc, Kethavar Compact Transit Hub 7. Canid subject, pastoral, female, approximately 9 years of age, name unknown. *. Her name is Cass. She was under the kitchen table when I read that, asleep on my left foot with the specific confidence of an animal that had decided that was where she was sleeping and the question was closed. I didn't feel the need to tell her. She already knew.